Hi, Jamie here again, and I'm here to talk to you about food labels and recognizing gluten-free foods or non-gluten-free foods when you're in the grocery store. I think one of the hardest things that you'll encounter when you're at the grocery store is trying to figure out which foods can you eat and which foods have gluten in them and which foods don't. If you are someone with celiac disease and you are now learning to eat entirely gluten-free, that also means finding gluten in your toothpaste and in your mouthwashes and your soaps and your other types of things that go into your body in one way or another. But for those of us who are a little bit more flexible, I have polycystic ovary disease, and so I eat gluten-free, but I don't have to worry about my food being contaminated with gluten like someone with celiac disease might. However, learning to read labels in the beginning takes a while. You spend a little bit longer in the grocery store, but at the end of the day, you do learn a lot from it. So let's take some time to just learn how to read labels and then also talk about some other terms that you might want to look out for that also mean gluten that you want to see. So I just pulled out a couple standard labels from my kitchen, some that have wheat in them and gluten in them and some that do not. I have to eat gluten-free, but my fiance James does not, and so we have a variety of different foods, and I have to be careful when I'm pulling things out of the cabinet that it is mine and not someone else's. Most labels nowadays are pretty clear about major allergens that someone might encounter in their foods. So they'll say about dairy or wheat and soy because those are common allergens. So as you can see in the Honey Nut Cheerios Medley Crunch, it's very bold and big at the bottom of the ingredients section that there is wheat and almond ingredients in this particular cereal. As we discussed on the wheat versus gluten video, we know that wheat has gluten in it because gluten is the protein that holds the wheat together. So obviously, this brand of cereal has gluten in it. As we look to other very similar items, we have Honey Nut Cheerios. Honey Nut Cheerios are gluten-free because this particular General Mills brand has tried to go very gluten-free as much as possible. But this leads to the question of, okay, I'm in the grocery store and these cereals are really similar, and I need to make sure I'm reading the label to make sure that I don't assume that all of these cereals by this particular company are gluten-free. So a lot of companies have gone to moving toward gluten-free, and they have options, which is awesome, but not all of their items are gluten-free. So just bear that in mind. You want to make sure that you look for it. Something that's a trick of the trade, a company cannot put gluten-free on their food labels unless they have been certified as gluten-free, meaning that their food is made in a facility that is completely free of gluten ingredients. If they are made in a facility where they could be cross-contaminated, they should say that on the label, so you'll be able to see that if you're truly reading the labels when you're at the grocery store. Another example of a food that we typically eat is Sara Lee classic bread, white bread. White bread is something that most people grow up eating, on your sandwiches or toast and things of that nature. So this has a little bit more specific food labels in terms of ingredients on it. So you'll see that it has enriched wheat flour, malted barley flour, and then we also see on there wheat gluten as well. So those ingredients all contain gluten. So we know about rye, we know about barley, we know about wheat gluten. So it talks about a lot of different grains that include the gluten protein. This lends to a whole host of names for gluten. So there's barley, there's bulgur, there's graham flour, malt vinegar, matzah bread, oatmeal, rye bread, semolina bread, spelt, wheat bran, wheat starch. So all those different grains have gluten in them. There's also a little bit more unknown, not less likely seen foods like Atta and Emmer and Farina and Foo. These are all types of wheat or dried gluten products made from wheat, and they are typically found in Asian dishes, so not even Asian foods are necessarily safe. Beer is a gluten food, certain broths, cereals, coffees, certain medicines. So gluten is found in a lot of things, and that's because it's a binding agent. So it's kind of put in a lot of different foods to help it keep its shape. So we really, really, really want to read those labels and ask if you are not sure. Another example of a common food that we eat is pasta. So I chose the Barilla pasta food labels, and as you can see down at the very bottom, it talks about allergen information, and it specifically says wheat cereals with gluten. So they've become really particular about making sure that they tell people that there's wheat in here, there's a grain in here that contains gluten. So that's been a really great change, I would say, in the last 5 years. When I started eating gluten-free, there were not as many options for us, their labels were not as clear, and now standard chain grocery stores are carrying gluten-free products, whereas in the past I had to go to places like Whole Foods to make sure that I had food that I could eat, in terms of, grabbing a canned soup or a cereal or things of that nature. Those are processed foods. Obviously, other gluten-free foods are fruit and vegetables, chicken, all that stuff. But a processed food that you might need on the go in our busy lifestyles was harder to come by. But now I can find cereals and pastas and breads and muffins and cookies and baking mixes in my standard grocery store right around the corner from my house. So these are just a few labels, and I hope that it's been instructional for you. I am going to include a link to WebMD on this page as well, so that you have a list of just some common foods and list names of ingredients that you can look out for, and wish you luck on your next grocery trip.